Sometimes, we only find our strength at the exact moment everything else is stripped away. Pain has a way of clarifying purpose, and for Isabel, the pain of betrayal didn't just shatter her, it sharpened her. The delivery room was meant to be sacred, a space where life begins anew for Isabel Morgan. But for her, it marked the end. She had just endured 22 hours of excruciating labor, delivering their daughter into the world. Her husband, Nathan, was across the city, entangled in the arms of someone else. He believed his betrayal was invisible, that the divorce would be clean, that he'd keep his wealth untouched. He thought he understood the woman he married. He was wrong. What followed wasn't merely a tale of infidelity. It was the unraveling of a man brought to his knees by a woman armed with quiet strength, legal precision, and a prenup he never saw coming. The Morgan estate, nestled in a manicured pocket of suburban Seattle, was a symbol of achievement, or at least the illusion of it. A stately craftsman home painted in a cool steel blue. Its windows aligned perfectly, staring out onto a lawn so precisely trimmed it looked synthetic. Inside, the decor was minimalist to a fault. White walls, hidden lighting, and furniture worth more than most sedans, but seemingly designed to discourage comfort. This was the domain Nathan Morgan had crafted, or rather, bought and styled to perfection. Nathan was sculpted by ambition. A senior executive at Braden Capital Partners, a powerful West Coast investment firm. He moved through life like a shark in bespoke suits, smooth, calculated, and always hunting. Tall, fit, with precisely tousled dark hair and eyes the pale blue of worn denim, he had the kind of looks that suggested both wealth and a personal trainer on retainer. To him, the world was measured in value and loss, and his wife Isabel had once been his most prized acquisition. Before she became Isabel Morgan, she was Isabel Chen. She wasn't a prize. She was a presence. Where Nathan was sharp lines and polished surfaces, Isabel was soft edges and steady warmth. Raised in a household of scholars and attorneys, she came from a world where conversations revolved around ideas, not income. She graduated at the top of her class in classical literature, a credential Nathan once found charming, if a little impractical. He adored her elegance, her quiet dignity, the way she transformed their cold designer house into something that resembled a home. He loved her as a reflection of his own rise, an ornament of beauty and refinement that made him look better by association. He wasn't even sure he loved her anymore. Their 5th anniversary was approaching, and Isabel was 9 months pregnant with their first child. The pregnancy had been a calculated decision, another marker on the Morgan family timeline, another milestone for Nathan, the final piece of the legacy he envisioned. For Isabel, it had been a lifeline. A desperate hope to salvage a marriage that now felt like an immaculate but soulless gallery. The emotional distance hadn't appeared suddenly. It crept in, quiet and cold. It was in the way Nathan always angled his phone away from her. The unexpected late-night meetings that left no trace of food or drink, only the sterile scent of air conditioning and the faintest whisper of unfamiliar perfume. It was in how his compliments had withered, from thoughtful and personal to empty pleasantries. "You look nice, babe." "Great dinner, Isabel wasn't naive. She noticed the fractures, the tiny signs of withdrawal. But she had poured her entire being into this relationship, her love, her best years, her professional ambitions, all paused for the child. She convinced herself that the baby would be the turning point, a symbol of their love in physical form, something to anchor them, something to remind Nathan of what mattered. She clung to that hope like driftwood in open water. But the growing dread had a name: Alina Morozov. Alina had recently joined Braden Capital as vice president of international markets. She was everything Isabel wasn't: cutting-edge, enigmatic, relentlessly ambitious. High cheekbones, eyes like obsidian glass, and a wardrobe of structured designer pieces. She carried herself with a chilling precision, radiating authority and control. Nathan talked about her with clinical admiration that somehow sounded more personal than professional. "Alina's a shark," he once remarked over dinner, swirling his whiskey in silence. "She locked down the Helsinki deal in 48 hours. The partners are ecstatic." "That's great, love," Isabel had murmured, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. "Must be amazing to work with someone so capable." "She's more than capable. She's efficient," he said flatly, his gaze distant. "No drama, No sentiment. It's a breath of fresh air. The word sentiment lingered between them like smoke from a quiet accusation. Isabel's entire world was rooted in sentiment. The stories in the books she adored, the art she studied, the home she kept, and the child she carried for Nathan. It had all become inefficient. The week before her due date, Isabel hosted a dinner party. These gatherings were her signature, seamlessly elegant, meticulously planned. The guest list was a curated sampling of their social tier, high-powered investors and their flawlessly polished wives, along with a few of Nathan's senior executives. The chatter was a predictable swirl of interest rates, Napa real estate, and elite preschool interviews. Isabel glided through it all, serene and radiant in a flowing pale jade gown, her pregnancy a soft halo around her. Nathan was in his element, charming, magnetic, laughing too loudly at his own jokes. At one point, Isabel watched him from across the room. He was showing something on his phone to his boss, Richard Kessler, a round man with a permanent flush and a fondness for fine whiskey. Then the phone buzzed. Isabel glimpsed the name on the screen just long enough, Alina Morozov, before Nathan tilted the device away with practiced ease. His face didn't change, but a subtle stiffness settled into his shoulders. He murmured an excuse and stepped out onto the terrace, phone already pressed to his ear. The cold sense of dread was immediate and instinctive, like muscle memory. Her sister, Julia, a pragmatic ER doctor with no tolerance for pretense, appeared beside her. "You all right, Is? You look like you've seen a ghost." Isabel forced a smile. "Just tired. This baby's heavier every day." But Julia wasn't buying it. Her eyes followed Isabel's toward the terrace, where Nathan now paced, a dark shape against the fading sky. Still with the late-night calls to the ice queen from Helsinki, Isabel said nothing. She didn't need to. Julia had been her one constant, the only person she had confided in. She had the clarity of a physician and the unshakable loyalty of a sister. And she loathed how easily Nathan dismissed Isabel's quiet despair. "Listen to me," Julia said, her voice low and unwavering. "Guys like Nathan, they don't change. They just get better at hiding. But you're carrying his child. That gives you power now. Don't forget that." They were meant as words of strength, but they left Isabel hollow. Power? She felt powerless. Her entire existence rested on this marriage, a marriage she now feared had no real structure beneath it. Just the illusion of something solid. That night, after the last guest had gone, the silence in the house was deafening. Nathan was in his study, door closed. Isabel stood alone in the nursery, a soft, gender-neutral yellow filling the walls. The crib was ready. The mobile of hand-stitched felt animals hung still above it. She placed her hand on the smooth, cool wood of the crib's rail. This was supposed to be their shared dream, their future. So why did it feel like it belonged only to her? Isabel walked quietly to Nathan's study and pushed the door open without knocking. He was seated behind his massive walnut desk, laptop open but untouched. He wasn't working. He was gazing out the window, his expression clouded with something unnameable. As he heard the door, he slowly turned in his chair, his face quickly rearranging into a tired but affectionate mask. "Hey, couldn't sleep? I wanted to talk." "It's late," he said, already dismissing her. "You need to rest." "We both do. Big week coming. The baby could arrive any day." "Nathan, I need you here. I need to know that you're with me. Really with me." Her voice cracked, and she despised it, hated how needy she sounded, how weak. He got up and crossed the room, gathering her into a hug that felt too choreographed, too practiced. He smelled of expensive scotch and something else. That same subtle floral perfume, Alina's perfume. "Of course I'm with you," he murmured into her hair. "You and the baby, you're everything. Everything I do is for you." It was the perfect line, said with perfect sincerity. The kind of lie a man tells so often, even he starts to believe it. Isabel leaned into him, closing her eyes, her chest tight. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted it more than anything. But her body betrayed her. Her arms remained limp at her sides, her muscles tight with suspicion. Her heart pounded, not with love, but with dread. The ache behind her eyes burned as she bit back tears, the air thick with silence that said more than any words ever could. But in that moment, his arms around her, the house silent and suffocating, the baby kicked hard, sharp and sudden. A warning. Don't trust him. And in that instant, standing in the grand sterile house that felt more like a gilded cage than a home, Isabel Morgan felt something cold and unshakable begin to form inside her. It wasn't about saving the marriage anymore. It was about survival. The first contraction came at 3:17 a.m. Not the dramatic movie version with a burst of water and screaming, but a low, persistent ache in her back, a tightening in her belly like a giant fist clenching from the inside. Isabel stayed still in their king-sized bed, the space beside her empty and undisturbed. Nathan had come to bed late and left even earlier. His side was barely touched. His note on the pillow was short and aggravatingly upbeat. Morning is had to run, crisis call with the Singapore office. You know how it is. Call me if anything happens. Love, N. Isabel crushed the note in her fist. A crisis call. It was always a crisis. A market crash, a client drama, a board meeting. Their life was a revolving door of emergencies, none of them hers. Another contraction rolled through her, stronger this time. She breathed through it, glancing at her phone. 7 minutes apart, this was it. She called Julia first. It's starting. Okay, breathe. Julia's calm voice was like a balm. Did you call the jackass? He's at the office. Crisis call, Isabel replied, the words bitter on her tongue. Of course he's okay. Listen to me. Call him now. Tell him to get his ass home. I'm leaving the hospital. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't go anywhere alone. Isabel hung up and immediately called Nathan's cell, straight to voicemail. Hi, you've reached Nathan Morgan. I'm unavailable at the moment. Please leave a message. Nathan, it's me. Her voice was strained, breath hitching as another contraction tore through her. The baby's coming. The contractions are 7 minutes apart. You need to come home. Now. She tried to breathe slowly, but her fingers were trembling. Her free hand gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, knuckles white. The house felt impossibly large, empty and echoing, like a theater, long after the audience had left. She had never felt more alone. She hung up and tried his office line. A bored-sounding receptionist answered. Braden Capital, how may I direct your call? Nathan Morgan, please. It's his wife. It's an emergency. I'm sorry, ma'am. Mr. Reb Morgan is in a priority meeting and cannot be disturbed. I'm in labor, Isabel snapped, panic and fury bleeding into her voice. Put him on the phone. I have strict instructions, ma'am. I can leave him a message. Tell him his wife is in labor. Tell him to check his damn voicemail. The line went dead. Isabel stood frozen, the phone still in her hand, its dial tone buzzing in her ear like static. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. She stared blankly at the wall, her breath ragged, as another contraction ripped through her like a wave of betrayal. He wasn't coming, not now, not when it mattered most. She slammed the phone down, hand shaking. Across the city, the so-called priority meeting was taking place in a penthouse suite at the Palisade Hotel, a place famed for its exclusivity and privacy. The only people in the room were Nathan Morgan and Alina Morozov. The crisis call was the distant hum of cars 10 stories below. Alina sat perched on the edge of the desk, wearing one of Nathan's expensive silk dress shirts, her long legs crossed elegantly. A half-empty bottle of champagne rested in an ice bucket beside her. The phone buzzed again. Nathan glanced at it with mild irritation. Alina raised a sculpted brow. Let me guess, Braxton Hicks? 7 minutes apart, he said, running a hand through his hair like he was stressed, though he wasn't. I should probably go. Oh, sweetheart, Alina purred, sliding off the desk and winding her arms around his neck. First babies take forever. She'll be at the hospital for hours. You'll be bored stiff. She leaned in, her voice smooth. Besides, Richard's expecting us to have the Berlin proposal numbers finalized by noon. He doesn't care about your domestic drama. She kissed him. A slow, lingering kiss that tasted of champagne and power. Nathan felt the brief tug of guilt, a flicker of conscience pulling up the image of Isabel, pregnant and waiting. But Alina's hunger, her laser-focused ambition, was a drug he couldn't resist. It matched his own. She got it. She knew that work, success, that was the real mission. Family, that was just the polished set piece, a respectable narrative. We have to be ruthless to get what we want, Nathan, she whispered against his lips. You taught me that. His phone buzzed again. A message from Isabel. Where are you? I'm scared. He silenced the phone without reading further and tossed it aside onto the hotel bed. The numbers, he said, his voice tightening with resolve. Let's run them again. Back at the Morgan house, Julia burst through the front door and found Isabel on all fours in the living room, shaking through a contraction. "That's it. Breathe. Deep," Julia coached, shifting seamlessly from sister to doctor. She grabbed the packed hospital bag waiting by the door. "Forget him. We're going. I'm driving." The car ride blurred with pain and eerie stillness. Outside the windows, the world moved on. People jogging, sipping lattes, walking dogs, oblivious to the fact that Isabel's world was shattering in real time. With every pothole in the road, every stoplight that took too long, her breath grew more ragged. This wasn't just labor, it was heartbreak delivered in waves. At the hospital, the sterile halls and harsh lights were frightening and comforting all at once. They got her into a labor and delivery room. The contractions were speeding up now, hitting harder, each one a crashing wave that nearly drowned her. Isabel clung to her phone like it was a lifeline. She typed another message to Nathan, at the hospital. "Room 304. Please come." No response. Hours passed, blurring together in a haze of sweat, ice chips, and pain. Julia never left her side. She held her hand, wiped her brow, translated medical jargon like a pro. "You're at 5 centimeters. You're doing amazing." "Where is he?" Isabel sobbed as another contraction gripped her body. "Why isn't he here?" "He's a coward," Julia replied. "That's it. Focus on you. Focus on the baby. We don't need him." But Isabel did. In that terrifying, primal space between two worlds, between who she was and who she was about to become, she wanted her husband. She wanted the man who once knelt beside her and promised to be her rock. She wanted the voice that once calmed her in the dark, the hand that once rested protectively over her belly. His absence hurt more than the contractions. It gnawed at something deeper. Around noon, her water broke. The pain hit a new level. Blinding, consuming. Monitors beeped. Nurses moved efficiently. The baby's heartbeat thumped steadily, a tiny rhythmic drum in the chaos. Thump, 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 a quiet anchor in her storm. Back at the Palisade Hotel, Nathan and Alina were celebrating. The proposal was finished, and it was genius. They were electric with adrenaline, thrilled by the synergy, the strategy, the promise of a massive payday. They had just ordered oysters and more champagne. Nathan finally glanced at his phone, a trail of missed calls and panicked messages. Room 304. A flicker of guilt passed through him. He buried it quickly. "I really have to go," he said, standing and starting to dress. "She's at the hospital." Alina pouted. "You're no fun. You'll be back tonight, won't you?" "I don't know, Alina. I'm going to be a father." The word tasted strange, unnatural in his mouth. "Don't worry," she said, tracing a finger down his chest, her tone light and careless. "It won't change anything between us." He looked at her cold, calculating eyes, and for a brief second he felt a chill. He kissed her quickly, mechanically, and left. In the hotel lobby, he grabbed a coffee, checked his reflection in the mirror, and arranged his face into a mask of worried urgency. He had his story ready. The Singapore servers had gone down. The deal was in crisis. He'd rushed over the second he could get away. It was plausible. Exactly what someone like him would say. Back in the delivery room, the universe had shrunk down to the walls of room 304. It was late afternoon. Isabel was completely drained, her body stretched to the brink. The doctor, a gentlewoman with weary eyes, checked her once more. "Okay, Isabel, it's time. You're at 10 centimeters. With the next contraction, I want you to push." This was the final climb. With Julia on one side and a nurse on the other, Isabel pushed. Through the pain, through the betrayal, through the white-hot rage burning in her chest. She pushed with a force she hadn't known she possessed. It was raw, animalistic, fueled by love for a child she hadn't yet seen, and fury toward the man who wasn't there. "I see the head," the doctor announced. "One more big push, Isabel. You're almost there." Isabel summoned everything she had left. One last push, blinding, burning, brutal. And then release. A hollowing silence. Then a cry. Thin, piercing, angry. "It's a girl," the doctor said, her voice trembling with warmth. "She's beautiful." They placed the baby on Isabel's chest, a tiny, squirming, red-faced miracle with a full head of dark hair. Isabel looked down at her daughter, and just like that, in the world outside room 304, the pain, the fury, the betrayal, it all faded away. There was only this tiny, perfect human, her daughter. Tears rolled down Isabel's cheeks. Tears of joy, of overwhelming relief, and a protective love so fierce it took her breath away. She was a mother, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt grounded, like something inside her had finally clicked into place. The pain, the betrayal, the abandonment, they still existed, but they were drowned out by the overpowering instinct to protect the little girl in her arms. Just then, the door swung open. Nathan Morgan strode into the room, holding an absurdly oversized bouquet of red roses. His face was the picture of anxious, loving concern. Sweetheart, I'm here. I got here as fast as I could. That meeting from hell just ended. Did I miss it? He stopped mid-step, his gaze falling on the newborn curled against Isabel's chest. His smile hesitated, flickering. Isabel looked up at him. Her eyes, red-rimmed, hollowed by exhaustion, were like ice, unforgiving and crystal clear. She looked him over, from his perfectly styled hair and pressed shirt to her own sweat-drenched hospital gown. Then she looked down at the child he hadn't cared enough to meet. The moment stretched, thick, brittle silence wrapping around them. Isabel saw everything now, the lies, the selfishness, the way he always chose work, power, or worse, her. And yet here he was, too late, with roses that meant nothing. And in that crystal-clear post-labor stillness, she saw him for exactly what he was. "You're too late," she said, her voice flat, emotionless. "Her name is Sophie. Sophie Chen. Get out." The words dropped into the room like broken glass. "Get out." Nathan's carefully constructed expression crumpled. The anxious, apologetic partner vanished, replaced by a man completely unprepared, exposed. "What is? Don't be like this. I told you the deal." "I don't care about your deal," Isabel said, her voice soft but iron-lined. She never broke eye contact. "I called you. I texted you. I was in labor for 22 hours, Nathan. 22 hours, and you were in a meeting." Julia, who had been silent by the window, stepped forward. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her face drawn with fatigue and fury. "She's right. You need to leave, now." Nathan turned to her with a glare of pure hostility before refocusing on Isabel, his tone dropping into that familiar, condescending softness. "Sweetheart, you're hormonal. You're exhausted. Let's not say things we'll regret. Look, our daughter is here." He stepped closer to the bed, his gaze fixed on Sophie. She's beautiful." He reached out a hand, inching toward the baby's head. "Don't you dare touch her," Isabel snapped, instinctively curling her body protectively around her daughter. The force in her voice made him recoil as if physically struck. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, now on the edge of losing control. Anger starting to creep in. "I'm her father. I have a right to be here." "A right?" Isabel let out a laugh, a sharp, hollow sound. "Rights are earned, Nathan. You weren't here when she took her first breath. You don't get to walk in with your stupid flowers and flimsy excuses and pretend to be her father. You gave up that right." The air in the hospital room was dense, closed in. She could smell it now, that perfume. It clung to his expensive suit, faintly floral with a musky undertone. The same scent he'd come home wearing the night before. Alina's scent. The last piece clicked into place. The lie exposed itself like a wound. It was never a meeting. It never had been. The blood drained from Isabel's face. The raw, primal strength that had carried her through labor dissolved, leaving her trembling and hollow. The walls of the room seemed to tilt. "Get out," she whispered, voice cracking. "Please, just go." Marcus saw the shift in her, and he pounced. His voice turned gentle, laden with fake remorse. "I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I messed up. I was under a mountain of pressure. I wasn't thinking, but I can make this right for both of you." But Julia had seen it too, the way Isabel sagged, the way the fight drained from her body. She stepped in, placing a firm hand on her sister's shoulder. "Did you hear her?" she said coldly. "Go. The new mother needs to rest. I'm her sister. I'm her doctor, and I'm telling you to leave before I call hospital security." Nathan's jaw tightened as he glared at Julia, eyes filled with fury, but he knew he'd lost, for now. He dropped the bouquet of roses onto the table with a thud. "Fine, I'll go. But we are going to talk about this when you're being more reasonable." He pulled the door closed behind him with a soft click, a sound that felt as final as a judge's gavel. The second he was gone, Isabel's composure crumbled. Sobs tore from her chest, deep and shaking. Julia climbed onto the edge of the bed, wrapping her arms around her. Isabel wept, for her broken marriage, for the dream that had curdled into a waking nightmare, for her daughter, who had arrived into a world already cracked wide open by betrayal. He was with her, Isabel sobbed, gasping between breaths. The whole time, he was with Alina. Julia held her tighter. I know. I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. What do I do now? The words came out like a broken prayer. Her life, once so carefully planned, was shattered. She was a mother now, with a tiny, helpless baby depending on her, and she had never felt more alone. Right now, Julia said, her tone steady and no nonsense. You're going to rest, you're going to eat, and you're going to feed your beautiful daughter. We'll handle him tomorrow, and the day after that, one step at a time. The next several days passed in a haze, postpartum hormones, aching limbs, and an all-consuming love for Sophie. The nurses showed Isabel how to bathe her, how to swaddle her, how to help her latch. And in the quiet, solitary hours of the night, Isabel would simply stare at her daughter's face. She memorized every detail, the curve of her eyelids, the tiny bow of her lips, the way her small fingers curled tightly around Isabel's. This child, this tiny person, was her anchor. Sophie was the reason to fight. Nathan, meanwhile, launched a campaign of attrition, a steady stream of texts. Thinking of you, hope you're getting some rest, sent something for Sophie, hope she likes it. It was a Dior baby blanket, obscenely expensive, dry clean only. We need to talk, I love you. She ignored them all. There was nothing he could say now that would rewrite what he'd chosen. Each message only solidified her resolve. He was still trying to control the narrative, still pretending as if love could be transactional. She asked the hospital staff to block his calls and ban him from visiting her room. When discharge day arrived, she didn't call Nathan. She called Julia. Julia pulled up to the hospital's entrance, not in her usual sedan, but in a large SUV Isabel didn't recognize. Whose car is this? Isabel asked, as Julia gently helped her buckle a sleeping Sophie into a brand new car seat. It's a rental, Julia said. Your house isn't safe anymore, you're not going back there. What? But all my things, the nursery. It's just stuff. We can replace stuff. What we can't replace is your peace of mind. Isabel looked at her sister, really looked, and saw the unflinching, protective love in her eyes. Julia hadn't just been offering comfort, she'd been planning. Behind that calm composure, Julia had been moving with silent precision, making decisions, taking action, protecting both Isabel and Sophie in ways Isabel hadn't even known she needed. They didn't drive back to Isabel's house. They drove somewhere she hadn't been in years, her parents' old home. After her father passed away 5 years ago and her mother moved into a retirement community, the house had sat empty, maintained by a caretaker. It was a place full of memories, a place untouched by Nathan. As they pulled into the driveway, another car was already waiting. A woman in a tailored, elegant business suit stepped out. Her eyes were kind, her smile warm. Isabel, this is Anjali Sharma, Julia said. She's a friend of a friend and the best family law attorney in the state. Isabel blinked in disbelief. A lawyer? Julia, I just gave birth 3 days ago. Anjali stepped forward, her voice calm but unwavering. Isabel, I know the timing is terrible, but Nathan's already making calls. He's spoken to 2 of the top divorce attorneys in the city. He's not waiting, which means we can't either. The icy truth hit Isabel hard. Nathan wasn't trying to win her back. He was preparing for war. He was setting the narrative, framing her as an unstable, emotional new mother, locking down assets before she even had time to think. But the realization didn't crush her. It hardened her. The last remnants of the soft, hopeful woman she had once been were gone, burned away. What remained was clear, sharp, and ready. She looked from Anjali's composed expression to Julia's steady gaze, then down at Sophie, asleep in her arms. Julia had been right. She had power now. Okay, Isabel said, her voice solid. What do we do? First, Anjali replied, offering a small, measured smile, we get you inside with a cup of tea. Then you're going to tell me everything, and I mean everything. But before that, there's one question I need to ask. When you and Nathan got married, did you sign a prenuptial agreement? Isabel's mind flicked back to a stuffy law office 5 years earlier. Nathan had called it a formality, just standard language to protect family wealth. He'd barely skimmed it. It's all boilerplate, babe, he'd said. Sign here, here, and here. But her father, a sharp-minded law professor with a deep skepticism of Nathan's polished charm, had insisted on reviewing it. He'd taken a week, brought in his own legal team, made adjustments, strengthened clauses, heightened the language. At the time, Isabel had been embarrassed by the fuss, but she'd trusted her father. She had almost forgotten it even happened. "Yes," Isabel said slowly, as the memory resurfaced. "We did. My dad, he had his lawyers revise it. They added some things." Anjali's smile grew. "Good," she said, eyes gleaming with intent. "That's very good. I'll have a courier pick up a copy from your father's files tomorrow. Let's see what kind of ammunition he left behind, shall we?" The old house was a balm for Isabel's fractured spirit. It smelled of lemon polish and old paperbacks, a comforting fragrance from childhood that made the sterile coldness of Nathan's mansion seem even more alien. Julia had stocked the fridge. Anjali had arranged for a night nurse to help during the first week, so Isabel could sleep. For the first time in months, Isabel felt like she could breathe. While she rested and bonded with Sophie, Anjali Sharma went to work. She moved like a storm of quiet efficiency, a woman who understood that in high-stakes divorce, the one who strikes first often strikes best. Nathan, predictably, made the first official move. 1 week after Sophie's birth, a courier delivered a thick envelope to the old house. It was a petition for divorce. Isabel's hands trembled as she read the cold, clinical language. Nathan was citing irreconcilable differences. He had attached a proposed settlement which, as Anjali later described, was insultingly generous. On the surface, he offered her the house, a lump sum alimony payment, generous child support, enough money to live comfortably, a golden parachute meant to make her disappear quietly. But Anjali saw through it immediately. "He's trying to buy you off before we even reach discovery," she explained, her fingers tented in front of her as they sat in the sun-drenched living room. "He's valuing his company shares at their original offering price, not their current value. And he's not disclosing any offshore accounts. We know his firm uses them. This offer? It's probably less than 10% of his real net worth." "Can he do that?" Isabel asked, rocking a sleeping Sophie in her arms. "He can try," Anjali replied, her smile tight. "But he's betting on you being too emotional, too overwhelmed to fight back." She looked Isabel in the eye. "He's underestimating you. That's our advantage." The very next day, the copy of the prenuptial agreement arrived. Anjali spread the pages across the dining room table, each one thick, crisp, and marked by the weight of legal precision. For a long while, there was only the sound of rustling paper, and Anjali occasionally murmuring in thought. Then she looked up. Her eyes sparkled with something like triumph. "Isabel, your father was a genius." She turned the document around and pointed to a paragraph mid-page. Article 5, Clause C. It was titled Infidelity Penalty Clause. "This is not boilerplate," Anjali said, her voice reverent. "This is a masterpiece. Most prenups have a lifestyle clause, some vague reference to expectations of behavior. This is ironclad." She read aloud. "In the event of a divorce resulting from a proven act of marital infidelity, the division of marital property shall shift from the standard 50-50 split to 75-25s in favor of the non-offending party. Furthermore," Anjali paused, letting the moment hang for effect, "it stipulates that all assets, including projected future earnings from deals initiated during the marriage, are considered marital property under this clause." Isabel blinked at her, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means," Anjali said, barely able to contain her excitement, "that if we can prove he was with another woman, you don't just get a bigger piece of the pie, you get a piece of a much, much bigger pie. The Berlin proposal, the one Alina Morozov helped him close? If we invoke this clause, a significant portion of his bonus from that deal legally belongs to you." From beyond the grave, Isabel's father had left her a weapon of mass destruction. He had seen the predator in Nathan long before Isabel had let herself see it. The thought brought tears to her eyes. "But how do we prove it?" Isabel asked. "It's just my word against his. He'll say he was working." "That's the next step," Anjali said, pulling a legal pad closer. "We need evidence. We need a timeline. You said you smelled her perfume. What hotel was it?" "The Palisade," Isabel answered. "He's mentioned it before for out-of-town clients." "Good, that's something." Anjali jotted it down. "Did he use a credit card? A joint one?" "No," Isabel said. "His personal Amex. I'm not on that account, but the statements go to the house. The paperless ones go to his private email, but he always has the year-end summary mailed for tax prep." Perfect, we'll subpoena those. What about Alina? Do we know anything about her? Only what he told me, Isabel said. She's ruthless, ambitious. She paused, a dark thought forming. Would someone that ambitious be careless? It was a long shot, a wild guess born from instinct, but it was all she had. Anjali didn't dismiss it. She hired a private investigator, a discreet former detective named Frank Miller. Quiet, methodical, an expert in asset tracing and behavioral forensics for high-net-worth clients. While Frank began his silent investigation, Nathan grew bolder. He misread Isabel's silence as surrender. He launched a PR campaign, subtle, deliberate, among their shared social circle. He cast himself as the heartbroken husband pushed away by an unstable, hormonal new mother. He'd call their mutual friends, voice dripping with sorrow. I just don't know what to do, he'd sigh. The hormones really changed her. She's not the woman I married. I'm just trying to do what's best for Sophie. It worked. Isabel began receiving calls, soft-voiced concern disguised as advice. Be reasonable. Think of the baby. Take the deal as Nathan's being generous. The isolation was suffocating. Only Julia remained, a stalwart defender, the one voice Isabel could rely on. She fielded calls, shut down the pity, and told people exactly where they could shove their concern. A month after Sophie's birth, Frank Miller delivered his first report. It was a gold mine. Nathan had booked a suite at the Palisade Hotel for the 2 nights surrounding Sophie's birth. Paid for using his personal Amex. But that was just the beginning. Frank had also turned his attention to Alina Morozov, and he'd discovered something interesting. Alina, it turned out, was even more calculating than Nathan had realized. Months earlier, she'd been passed over for a promotion. The role went to a male colleague with less experience. In response, Alina had filed a confidential complaint with HR. It had been quietly dismissed. She was a woman with a grievance, and one who understood leverage. Here's where it gets good, Anjali said, flipping through Frank's report. Alina has an Instagram. It's private, but one of Frank's associates got in. Mostly travel shots, upscale dinners. But look at this. She turned the laptop toward Isabel. The screen showed a photo posted 2 weeks ago. Alina, glowing and glamorous, standing on a beach in St. Bart's. On her wrist, a Cartier love bracelet, distinctive, unmistakable, and very expensive. Isabel gasped. It was the closing gift Nathan had bragged about buying for a client after the Warsaw deal. He'd shown it to her, boasted about the cost. That's not all, Anjali said, eyes gleaming. Frank dug into the Hull's room service logs for the night Sophie was born. 2 dinners were charged to Nathan's suite, oysters and 2 bottles of vintage Dom Perignon. And breakfast the next morning, 1 black coffee, 1 pot of Earl Grey tea with lemon. Isabel's voice caught. I drink black coffee. Nathan hates it. He drinks Earl Grey with lemon. It was a detail only a wife would know, and in his arrogance, Nathan had duplicated their routine with his mistress, without a second thought, the ultimate insult, and the final nail in his coffin. But it wasn't even the worst of it. The most damning piece of evidence came from an unexpected direction. Frank had discovered that Alina had recently retained her own legal counsel, a litigator known for wrongful termination suits. It appeared Miss Morozov was gearing up for her own war with Sterling Croft. Through his network, Frank learned that Alina had something she referred to as her insurance policy, secret recordings of her conversations with Nathan. In them, Nathan not only spoke disparagingly of his wife, but also detailed, in his own voice, the firm's shady, borderline illegal tactics to hide assets and understate company valuations. Alina wasn't just a mistress. She was a corporate saboteur in the making, playing her own long game. And Nathan? He was merely a pawn. Anjali leaned back in her chair, a slow, dangerous smile creeping across her face. He thought he was the predator, she said softly, but he was swimming with a bigger shark. His affair wasn't just going to cost him his marriage. It could destroy his entire career. Isabel looked at her attorney, then down at Sophie, now awake and gurgling in her arms. The fear and betrayal were still there, a dull ache under her ribs, but it wasn't consuming her anymore. What filled her now was something sharper, cleaner, like steel forged in fire, but something new flickered to life, resolve, cold, steady, unshakable. She was going to win. And she wasn't just fighting for herself, or even her daughter. She was fighting for every woman who had ever been dismissed, deceived, or left behind. She was done being collateral damage in someone else's story. This time, she was writing the ending. "Set the court date," Isabel said, her voice even and strong. "It's time for Mr. Chen to face the consequences." The Connecticut Superior Courthouse buzzed with restrained tension. Nathan Chen entered flanked by his high-powered legal team, exuding the smug confidence of a man who believed the world still bent to his will. He scanned the room, expecting to see a broken woman, meek, apologetic, fragile. He was still searching when the clerk called the case. His attorney, Bill Dunham, assured the visibly impatient Judge Carol Riley that the petitioner was on her way. And then, the courtroom doors opened. Heads turned. It was a moment. Isabel Chen walked in, not as a victim, but as a queen. She wore a tailored ivory dress. Her face was calm, serene. On her hip, 4-month-old Sophie. At her side, Anjali Sharma, poised and impenetrable. The scene was stunning, Madonna and child flanked by a warrior. Nathan stared. This was not the weeping, irrational woman he had described to colleagues and friends. This was someone rebuilt from ruin, someone who had stared into abandonment, betrayal, and pain, and emerged more powerful. This was someone else entirely. "Apologies, Your Honor," Anjali said smoothly as they approached their table. "We were just feeding the youngest member of this proceeding." Dunham stood, tone tinged with condescension. "Your Honor, this is simple. My client has extended a generous offer. We're here to ratify it so both parties can move forward." Judge Riley turned her gaze to Anjali. "Miss Sharma?" "We reject the offer, Your Honor," Anjali said clearly. "We consider it predatory and built upon fraudulent misrepresentation of marital assets. We will not be accepting the default terms of the prenuptial agreement." "Because we intend to invoke a different clause." Nathan leaned toward Dunham, voice low and tense. "What is she talking about?" Dunham waved a hand dismissively. "She's bluffing." Judge Riley tilted her head. "And which clause is that, Miss Sharma?" "Article 5, Clause C, Your Honor," Anjali said clearly. "The infidelity penalty clause." The words hit Nathan like a punch to the gut. His face drained of color. A sudden tightness gripped his chest, not from guilt, but from panic. He remembered the conversations, the red pen in his father-in-law's hand, the way the man had read every word of that prenup like it was a war strategy. And now the battlefield was real. The memory of Isabel's father, his quiet scrutiny, his constant questions, came flooding back with sudden, terrifying clarity. Dunham looked rattled. "There are no grounds. My client has been a faithful husband." "Is that so?" Anjali replied, unbothered. "Then perhaps Mr. Chen can clarify Exhibit A." She nodded to the bailiff, who delivered a folder to the judge. Inside were credit card statements, charges for a penthouse suite at the Palisade Hotel, booked for the exact 2 nights Isabel was in the hospital, giving birth. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Judge Riley's eyes narrowed. Her voice dropped. "Mr. Chen, this receipt shows oysters and champagne. What were you celebrating?" Nathan cleared his throat. "A business deal. High-stakes negotiations. With my colleague, Alina Morozov." "Ah yes, Miss Morozov," Anjali said, pulling another document. "Exhibit B, room service charges for breakfast, 1 black coffee, 1 pot of Earl Grey with lemon." She turned to Nathan, head tilted. "Mr. Chen, how do you take your tea?" Nathan froze. "Earl Grey," he said quietly. "And I drink black coffee," Isabel added, her voice soft but ringing clearly through the courtroom. "He knows that." Judge Riley's face hardened. Her disgust was visible. "Circumstantial," Dunham sputtered. "All of this is circumstantial." "Then let's move on," Anjali said coolly. She held up a plastic evidence bag. Inside it gleamed a Cartier love bracelet. Exhibit C. Mr. Chen claimed this was a client gift celebrating the Warsaw deal. But the same bracelet showed up here. She turned the laptop toward the judge, an Instagram post. Alina, sun-kissed and smiling on the beaches of St. Bart's, wearing the bracelet. During a business conference Nathan had supposedly attended alone. Gasps rippled through the room. And in that moment, Nathan felt the shift. He wasn't defending a lie anymore. He was standing in its ruins. Nathan's head spun. His own narrative was collapsing in real time. Dunham's objections were faint, meaningless. Anjali delivered the final blow. "Mr. Chen, you testified that you're a devoted husband. Is that right?" "Yes," Nathan mumbled. "Then why?" Anjali let the silence build. "Did you tell Alina Morozov, in a conversation she recorded, that your wife was a sentimental liability, and that you couldn't wait for the divorce so you could finally be with someone who understands what it takes to win? Silence. Total, brutal silence. It was the sound of a man being stripped bare in front of the world. It was the kill shot. The courtroom exploded. Nathan looked as if he'd taken a bullet. His face went ghostly pale. Alina had recorded him. Silence. Judge Riley thundered, her gavel crashing down. Once the murmurs subsided, she turned to Anjali. "Do you have this recording, Miss Sharma?" "We do, Your Honor," Anjali replied calmly. "Along with a sworn affidavit from Miss Morozov, provided in exchange for our client's agreement not to name her as a co-respondent in this action." She allowed herself a slight smirk. "She's a very efficient woman." The judge turned her eyes to Nathan, her contempt crackling in the air. "Mr. Dunham," she said icily, "in light of this new evidence, I suggest you and your client reconsider your definition of generous. I am invoking Article 5, Clause C. We will reconvene in 1 hour." Her eyes narrowed, locking onto Nathan. "And Mr. Chen, I suggest you find a much better apology." Nathan turned slowly toward Isabel. She stood quietly, gently rocking a fussing Sophie in her arms. Her expression wasn't angry. It was pitying. It was the most crushing blow of all. He hadn't just lost the negotiation, or the money. He had lost everything that mattered. The hour-long recess was pure hell. In a cold, sterile conference room, Nathan was finally forced to face the full wreckage of what he'd done. Alina had played him. Hard. That word, efficient, rang in his ears, mocking him. Her recordings didn't just cover their affair. They were laced with his arrogant bragging about Sterling Croft's accounting tactics, about cutting corners, about hiding assets. His cheating hadn't only cost him his wife. It had armed his enemies with the very weapon that might destroy his entire career. When they returned to the courtroom, Nathan looked hollow, a ghost in designer tailoring. Anjali Sharma stood and presented the new settlement terms, not as a proposal, but as a verdict. Judge Riley read them aloud, her voice devoid of sympathy. 75% of all marital assets, subject to a full forensic audit including bonuses and unvested stock options. Sole legal and physical custody of the child, Sophie Chen to Mrs. Chen. Supervised visitation for Mr. Chen, contingent upon compliance with court-ordered co-parenting counseling. The residence shall be sold, proceeds divided under the new asset ratio. She looked up, pausing for effect. And a permanent gag order to prevent further reputational damage to the non-offending party. Her eyes met Nathan's. "Mr. Chen, do you agree to these terms?" He had no fight left. The recordings would be his ruin, both publicly and professionally. An SEC investigation was inevitable. This was his only way out. "Yes, Your Honor," he whispered. "Mrs. Chen?" Judge Riley asked. Isabel looked across the courtroom at the shattered man she had once loved. There was no satisfaction in Nathan's downfall, only a deep, quiet grief for the life they had once imagined. But then she glanced down at Sophie, sleeping peacefully in her arms. This was her victory. This was her future. "Yes, Your Honor," Isabel said, her voice unwavering. The gavel came down. Final, definitive. It marked the end of her old life. Nathan's collapse was swift. He was forced to resign from Sterling Croft to contain the damage. His name became a cautionary tale in the world of finance. The same friends who had once courted his favor stopped returning his calls. A king dethroned by his own arrogance. Isabel, by contrast, flourished. She shed the Chen name like a worn-out coat. She reclaimed her own, Isabel Hayes. With her settlement, she purchased a sunlit brownstone in the city. It had a garden for Sophie and a bright studio where she could paint again. The art she'd once abandoned became her lifeline. She poured everything into it: grief, rage, healing. 1 year later, a gallery-owning friend offered her a solo exhibition. Opening night was a revelation. The room buzzed with admiration. Guests moved slowly through the space, connecting with her story, told through brushstrokes and color. Isabel stood in the center of it all, quiet, proud. She saw Julia, beaming, Anjali, now a dear friend, raising a glass. Then a man approached, his smile warm, his voice sincere. "Your work is extraordinary," he said. "There's so much life in it." Isabel smiled, honest and unburdened. "Thank you," she said. "I had a lot to work through," he nodded. "Seems like you did." And in that moment, Isabel knew. She wasn't just okay. She was whole. The fire of betrayal hadn't consumed her. It had forged her. It burned away the cage she'd once mistaken for love and revealed the fierce, resilient woman within. Nathan had tried to reduce her to a footnote. Instead, she became the author of her story, her power, her next chapter. A story of survival, of transformation, of beginning again. Isabel's journey is a raw, powerful reminder that betrayal can be the spark that ignites strength. She didn't rise for revenge, she rose for her child, for herself, for every woman who has ever been underestimated. She didn't just win a case, she reclaimed her life, her name, her future. So the story is over, our wonderful friends. Are you still here at this hour? If you're still watching, still reading, then maybe, just maybe, something in this story touched your heart. And if it did, let's sit with that for a moment. Let's breathe into it. What happened to Isabel isn't just about betrayal or court battles. It's about something deeper. It's about reclaiming your worth when someone else tries to write you out of your own story. It's about remembering that your softness isn't weakness and that your strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "I deserve better." Isabel thought her life was over. But what if endings are really just unannounced beginnings? She became a mother, a fighter, an artist, and most importantly, she became herself again. The fire of betrayal didn't consume her, it forged her. Let that line stay with you. As the poet Rumi once said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." And oh, how brightly Isabel's light shone. So if you've ever been dismissed, doubted, betrayed, or simply broken open, know this: you're not alone. And this moment you're in, it's not the end. It might just be your beginning. If this story made you feel seen, please like this video. Share it with someone who might be standing in their own storm, searching for the eye. And if you'd like more stories like this, raw, real, and redeeming, subscribe to our channel and tap that bell. Because sometimes a single story can change how we see our own. You're not just surviving, you're becoming.